You're welcome.
Thanks. Next, we have Leslie Castro.
Can you hear
Leslie,
me?
are you with us? We can, and your minute starts now.
Thank you. I want to speak regarding an event that me and my partner witnessed Monday, June 1st in downtown Raleigh around 9:40 p.m. Me and my partner were driving towards a broken down car. We were not aware we were breaking curfew because we had not received any alert from the city about the curfew. We turned onto South Wilmington Street where a cop car suddenly pulled out in front of us to block a group of black men walking along the sidewalk. The men turned to walk away and at least 3 policemen got out of the car to approach the black men with aggressive tones and their hands automatically at their guns. By contrast, one of the police officers looked at my partner, a white man, and me, a light-skinned Mexican Native American woman, and told us we could drive past the scene. I believe the cops are racially profiling the men. If the cops had stopped to question the black men, they neglected to question us. I'm sure this incident is just one of many over the past week, and it is unacceptable, especially in the wake of last weekend's protests and the violence committed by Raleigh police towards peaceful protesters. Black Lives Matter. Thank you, City Council, and thank you, Sage, for the pride flag.
Thanks so much for calling in. Next, we have Faith Bradley.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Your minute starts now, Faith.
On Saturday, I was marching along McDowell Street where RPD dressed in riot gear fired tear gas at protesters in broad daylight in an attempt to avoid further escalation, and out of my own fear because RPD were obviously prepared to inflict harm, I continued walking up the empty block where a tear gas canister was already deployed in what I assume was an attempt to cut off the march and corral protesters. I ran up the street to avoid the fumes where I saw a child with their caretakers pouring water into their eyes because they were crying from the fumes. RPD's actions were violent and irresponsible, and the claims that bricks were thrown is completely untrue. The throwing of water bottles at cops who are dressed in riot gear does not warrant the use of a chemical weapon that is banned by the Geneva Convention on Warfare and that is also known to be an abortifacient and incredibly dangerous to children. The fact that tear gas continued to be deployed during protests in Raleigh about a man whose last words were "I can't breathe" and during a pandemic that targets our respiratory systems is sick. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Beth, I've lost my place. Will you help me?
Sure, we're at Ellis Driver.
Thank you. Ellis, if you're with us, let me know. We can. Your minute starts now.
The audacity and irony of the RPD taking a knee and appropriating the stance of black athletes and the people standing against them, assuming the stance that killed George Floyd is so profoundly tone deaf that it reveals the ugly truth that the RPD is not salvageable, not reformable, not deserving of our trust and respect, and not able to check themselves before committing one of the most obviously and blatantly offensive perversions of solidarity possible. We do not need you. We are safer without you. Defund the police. And for all the white people clapping, for the officers taking the very same murder stance that killed George Floyd and ignited these protests, you need to look really hard at the place where your heart should be and rip out whatever toxic vestige of white supremacy is there instead. Do better. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from was Ellis. I'll give staff a minute to catch up.
I believe we have a call-in person now.
Sure.
I believe it's Lauren Whitaker.
Of course. Lauren.
Hi, can you hear me?
Lauren, yeah, we can. Welcome.
Awesome, cool. Well, I just want to start with racism is a system of oppression, but what is going on right now is anti-blackness, and I want to make sure that you call it that. Second thing is bureaucracy is a system to aid in communication. It's not a moral shield to hide behind. I want you to come out from behind your shields. 3, tear down the monuments of Confederacy in the city of Raleigh. 4, end the imposed curfew and allow protesters to voice their demands. 5, and I need you to invest in rapid response COVID testing for those that put themselves in danger for justice. 6, defund the police. 7, Mayor Baldwin, resign from your position. Your actions have already proven that you are unfit for this position. 8, there are systemic issues in the city. As someone who is elected, I want you to know that your actions, the position you have assumed, also means that you have assumed the racist past. So until those acts are rectified, you are complicit in this system. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, we have Jen Verani.
Hi, Sage.
Hey, Jen. Thanks for being with us. Your minute starts now.
Sweet. As someone that was at the event that transpired at Ruby Deluxe on Monday, I believe it was a calculated action based on the bar's status in the queer community, based on Sheriff Gerald Baker's previous history of firing deputies out of retaliation for them calling out a supervisor for being homophobic. His history of promoting LGBTQ deputies does not equate him for being anti-homophobic, just like how white people can still be racist despite them having black friends. The previous night, white nationalists vandalized the bar and other LGBT displays. This is the same entity who was free to roam the streets weeks before in protest of the stay-at-home order with long-arm weapons, which is illegal. An undercover law enforcement officer working that event told me that they were instructed to ignore that threat in hopes it would encourage them from coming back with more escalation. This is the stance on white supremacy RPD has taken. There has been no statements or media coverage on their involvement with the destruction of property that happened downtown.
Thank you so much, Jen. Your minute is up, but thank you for calling in tonight. Next, we have Tyler Cruz.
Oh, hello. I just wanted to say that marijuana and drug laws have been historically wielded by police forces around the country to disproportionately target black individuals. And I call upon the Raleigh City Council to follow the lead of city and state governments around the country in attempting to decriminalize and legalize marijuana and other drugs in an effort to dismantle the prison system that we have built in this country. Black Lives Matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for calling in, Tyler. I appreciate it. Next, we have Wanda Hunter.
Mom. Can you hear me?
Hey, Wanda, we can, and your minute starts now.
Okay. Raleigh demands justice. Time's up. You're on notice. We demand accountability, transparency, and equity. We want the removal of Marianne Baldwin and Chief Dick Brown if we do not get these policies implemented. We want a recommendation to the North Carolina General Assembly for subpoena power for our Citizen Review Board, stopping over policing in black and brown communities, policy that requires a fellow officer to intervene when another officer is abusive to a detainee, investment in community-led health and safety strategies. Dick Brown, all lives will matter when Black lives matter. You have grieved broken glass. When will you grieve broken Black and brown lives? Melton, you keep saying you cannot grant us subpoena power. We are asking for a recommendation to go to the General Assembly as prior council did in response to HB2. It is not a riot, it is a rebellion. You want us to do better? Damn it, you do better.
Thank you for joining us, Wanda. Next, we have Miss Gloria Mayo. Miss Gloria, are you with us?
Hi.
Hi, Miss Gloria. We can hear you, and your minute starts now.
Okay, I just have 4 comments. The first one is they can make crime for police officers to intervene when other officers use excessive force. 2, that the police officers behold criminals, have criminal charges pressed against them, just like us citizens do. If we do the crime, they should do the crime time also. And remove police officers from immunity of prosecution, and 40 hours of training, which is 400 years of training for us, is not going to do it. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thanks for joining us, Miss Gloria. Next, we have Michael Bossy.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Michael, we can hear you, and your minute starts now.
The COVID crisis has given us a valuable analogy to the police brutality pandemic. We have symptomatic carriers of disease, such as the deputy shouting, "The game is over," and the Raleigh sergeant spraying an innocent man from 6 inches away, and every other violent, unaccountable officer. We need to quarantine the symptomatic officers swiftly so they cannot infect others, and we need to fire them immediately. We have the asymptomatic carriers, officers who hired, promoted, and allowed these cops to exist without reporting, arresting, or firing them. We need to take action against all the asymptomatics so they cannot proliferate the disease. We need to hold them accountable for their fellow officers' actions. We need to seize all travel to contain and isolate the disease, end all mutual aid agreements so our cops cannot infect others, and other towns cannot set back our own recovery. Do not allow blanket mutual aid agreements, and design a test to determine if other departments are healthy enough to enter Raleigh. The system is infected. Do not fire the chief only to replace her with another officer raised in the same disease environment. find a healthy officer, or fill the position with a civilian. Finally, the police already declared that the game is over. Let's start
Thank you
acting
so much
like
for
it.
joining us tonight, Michael. Your minute was over. Next, we have Jesse Post.
Hi.
Hey, Jesse. Your minute starts now.
Thank you for holding this session. The use of tear gas and force on peaceful demonstrators and medics this week in Raleigh is deplorable. Having a police advisory board is useless without giving the board the ability to hold law enforcement accountable. We need an advisory board that can participate in investigations and disciplinary decisions. We need important data on the events involving police within our community, especially policing and use of force on Black and brown citizens. Now is the time to act. Additionally, we need requirements for the use of de-escalation procedures and a ban on chokeholds. I'd like to see the funds proposed in the budget for police reduced. We need that money instead invested in community programs that build up and support robust resources, those for housing, mental health, education, and for...
Thank you so much for joining us, Jesse.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Melanie Core.
I'm a Raleigh native and the daughter of a retired Raleigh police sergeant, and my brother serves as a Raleigh fireman. The riots last Saturday were so saddening. Destruction of our city is not the answer. However, I saw the leadership and professionalism displayed by Chief Deck Brown and our Raleigh officers. I witnessed rocks, bricks, bottles of water, and bottles of urine thrown at our Raleigh police throughout the night. These same crowds that people are complaining about tear gas had these children have bricks, rocks, and large bottles of water thrown. This is anything but peaceful. I appreciate the dedication and hard work by our Raleigh police and our chief. An oversight committee will prove nothing more than body cameras do. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Melanie. I appreciate it. And I will give staff a minute to update the list.
Sage, just so everybody knows, we were able to provide a nice benchmark for people that we are on, people who signed up on or around 4 p.m. this afternoon. So that helps keep us over the list.
Great.
And now we have Eric Solomon.
Awesome. Thank you, Beth. Eric, are you with us? Eric? Eric, can you hear me? Hello?
Eric may have gotten so excited he hung up.
You may have.
Let us find the next person.
Let's do that.
We have Terrence Ruth.
Hello, hello, can you hear me?
Hey, Terrence, I can. Thanks for joining us. Your minute starts.
Hello, my name is Terrence Ruth, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for this time. This is a difficult season, and it requires compassion and moral leadership. And I challenge you tonight to build trust, honor the history of Black and brown communities, and save the lives of those who are in pain right now. And there are several ways that you could do this. End the use of chemical weapons and rubber bullets, reduce over-policing in poor communities, and stop police civil rights violations. I challenge our leaders to return dignity to Black and brown communities. And finally, I challenge our leaders to follow through in establishing relationships with members of our society that are required, even during a pandemic, to work for minimum wages. These are the people that are crying in the streets. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Terrence. Next, we have Jenny Halas.
Hi, Sage. Hello, can you hear me?
We can, Jenny. Thanks for being here. Your minute starts now.
Thank you. I'm a Raleigh resident since 1986, and I am in full support of the Raleigh Demands Justice Coalition and Raleigh PAC. In addition, I want an answer to the question of why the excessive force used at the BLM protests was not used during Reopen NC protests where protesters were actually armed. I demand Police Chief Dak Brown undergo additional sensitivity and diversity training if she is not removed. The passive video policy of police body cameras is not acceptable, and I urge you to require the officers to leave their cameras on all the time. The videos should be uploaded to a read-only cloud server that is time-stamped and accessible as needed. I'm also a parent with 2 children in the Wake County school system, and as such, I am disgusted with the report about Officer Bradenberg and his alleged comments while on duty at Enloe High School. I demand an investigation into this, and thank you very much for your time. Sage, happy Pride Month.
Thank you. Next, we have Kyle Chernoff.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks for joining us, Kyle. Your minute starts now.
I stand in solidarity with PAC's demands and won't reiterate them. Minorities are disproportionately targeted by police. A Stanford analysis of police data found that police were significantly more likely to stop black drivers during daylight when they can tell the race of the drivers than after dusk under veil of darkness. Here in Raleigh, the Wake County Sheriffs provided us an example when they fired crowd control munitions at the owner of the Ruby Deluxe LGBT club. The crime Mr. Lemuel committed was to offer water, shelter, and support to people fleeing the tear gas on the streets. Our Raleigh community is strong, and many businesses have proudly stood with and supported the protests. Why then was Mr. Lemuel targeted out for particular violence? Because minorities are always the first targets for policing, legitimate or otherwise. We need to take a hard and honest look at policing in our city. We need reform. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kyle. Next, we have Daniel Taylor.
Thank you, Sage. Just a few things. I'm not going to go over what we have all spent our good time reiterating this whole evening. I feel it's a fairly beautiful thing that we're all speaking the exact same thing. We all feel the same way. With that said, I personally would demand that Raleigh Police Department Chief Dak Brown resign immediately. Her and her force and the manner in which they handled the protest this past weekend was not only excessive, but a blatant slap in the face to this community. And you know what you did. You should be ashamed of yourself. Of the same token, Raleigh Mary Ann Baldwin, same deal. You know what you did. You should be disgusted with yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Beth, who do we have next?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes, Anna Pardo? Yep, go ahead, Anna.
Okay. My name is Anna Pardo. I've been in Raleigh for 21 years, right? And I've been an East Raleigh resident for 8 years. I was a CAC chair of the Hillsborough District for 6 years. I love my city. I am deeply invested in it. I thought we had reached maybe our lowest low when this council unceremoniously demolished the Citizens Advisory Councils, the only official feedback structure for Raleigh residents to organize around and voice their concerns. Needless to say, I was wrong. That decision and the many poor decisions that have happened over the last few days by this council have something in common. Both were designed to shut down public dissent. You couldn't even get the curfew right, and you all have gotten an email from me about this, the ways in which the curfew didn't seem to acknowledge. I mean, none of you really know anybody who works third shift. So I support the demands of Raleigh PAC. And
thank you so much, Anna. Your time is run out. Yeah, thank you.
I believe we have Skylar Bunn. This is a call-in user.
Great. Skylar, are you with us? Skylar, are you there?
Give me a second.
Sure, take your time.
Try now, Skylar.
Hello?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Great, you go ahead, your minute starts now.
Okay. If you want to show us that you care about Black lives, the council must reject the proposed budget, substantially decrease funding to policing, and use that money to invest in affordable housing, education, and transportation in Raleigh's Black neighborhoods. We need a police oversight board with investigation and subpoena power, with access to unedited body cam footage. We need a board with members elected by people in communities most affected by police violence. You have the power to make impactful changes now. Create policy that requires officers to intervene when another becomes abusive. And work tirelessly to see that you both positions to fight for the dignity of all of Raleigh's citizens. Remove Confederate monuments from public spaces. Get cops out of schools.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have Mason Binker.
Great.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
We can. Thanks for joining us. Your minute starts now.
Thank you. First, I want to speak in solidarity with PAC's demands. Obviously, I won't reiterate them, but I want to emphasize the point about removing Chief Deck Brown if they are not immediately implemented. Next, as one of the high schoolers who was heavily tear gassed to the extent that I had respiratory issues for 2 days afterward, and when I witnessed the pepper spraying and harassment of peaceful protesters on Saturday, I would like to know what is being done to investigate and remove the officers responsible for escalation of events on Saturday and Sunday. Next, I want to point out that there were 28 COVID deaths in Wake County, and that was either as a result or in relation to a virtually non-existent quarantine. But after 2 nights of property damage, that meant a sustained and heavily enforced curfew, and that just to me suggests that you guys value property over human life. To that point, Mayor Baldwin, why don't you just extend the curfew so this meeting can continue? And finally, if we don't get justice, you guys will get no peace.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Next, we have Brandon Luck.
Good afternoon, Mayor Baldwin. Sorry. Oh, jeez. All right. The system, the wheel, something that goes round but makes no sound and yet still comes around. It exists everywhere in every breath that isn't taken, every voice that isn't heard, and every word that isn't spoken. A flavor of self-interest that bemoans no other than itself. The lack of communication spawned from that self-interest can create a bubble, a pocket, a hole into which breath, words, and voices are thrown and trapped.